The evening sky turned orange and red as the sun went down behind the mountains. The air was cold, and the smell of wet earth filled the wind. Near the wide Nakdong River, a young boy walked slowly along the muddy bank. His name was Taeho, and he was 15 years old. His clothes were old and torn. His shoes had holes in them, but his eyes were sharp and careful, always watching, always listening. Taeho lived alone in a broken farmhouse about half a kilometer from the river. The house had once belonged to his family. His father had grown rice in the fields nearby. His mother had cooked warm meals and sung old songs in the kitchen. But that was before the aliens came. That was before everything changed. 3 years ago, the Velkai arrived on Earth. They came from somewhere far beyond the stars. Their ships filled the sky like metal clouds. They were tall beings, almost 2 meters high, with silver skin that shined in the light. They had 4 arms and 2 legs. Their eyes glowed in different colors, mostly purple or blue. They were strong and fast and smart. And they wanted Earth for themselves. The war was short and terrible. Humans fought back with everything they had. But it was not enough. The Velkai had weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Within 6 months, they controlled the northern half of the world. Millions of people died. Millions more became workers for the aliens, living in camps and following their rules. Taeho's parents died during the first attack on their village. His father tried to fight. His mother tried to run with Taeho in her arms. In the end, only Taeho survived. He hid in a hole under the floor of their house while fire burned everything above him. When he came out, the village was gone. His parents were gone. He was alone. For 3 years, he lived by himself. He learned to catch fish from the river. He learned to find vegetables and roots in the forest. He learned to stay quiet and hidden so that nobody would find him. The Velkai patrols sometimes passed through the area, but they never noticed the small farmhouse or the boy who lived inside it. To them, he was nothing. To the world, he did not exist. Taeho liked it that way. Being invisible meant being safe. On this evening, he was checking his fishing lines. He had placed them in the water that morning, hoping to catch something for dinner. As he walked along the river bank, he pulled up each line carefully. The first one was empty. The second one had a small fish, barely enough for one meal. He put it in his bag and kept walking. The third line was near a thick area of tall reeds. The plants grew high here, taller than Taeho himself. He pushed through them carefully, trying not to make too much noise. That was when he heard it. A sound. A strange sound. It came from the other side of the river. Taeho stopped moving. He held his breath and listened. At first, he thought it might be an animal, maybe a deer or a wild dog. But then the sound came again. And this time, he recognized it. It was a voice. Someone was crying out in pain. His heart began to beat faster. He had learned to avoid other people. Other people meant danger. They might be bandits who would steal his food. They might be Velkai soldiers who would kill him. Or they might be desperate refugees who would bring trouble to his doorstep. But something about this cry was different. It was high and strange, like nothing he had ever heard before. It did not sound human at all. Taeho moved closer to the water's edge. He looked across the river. The sun was almost gone now, and shadows covered the far bank. At first, he could not see anything, just rocks and mud and reeds, same as his side. Then he saw movement. Something was crawling through the reeds on the other side. Something big. It moved slowly and painfully, dragging itself toward the water. Every few seconds, it stopped and made that strange crying sound again. Taeho's first thought was to run. Whatever that thing was, it was not his problem. He had survived this long by minding his own business. He should go back to his house, eat his small fish, and forget what he saw. But he did not move. He stood there, watching, as the figure finally reached the water's edge. And then the last light of the sun hit it, and Teho saw what it was. It was a Velkai, a young one, from the size of it. Its silver skin was covered in mud and dark stains that might have been blood. Two of its four arms hung loose and broken at its sides. One of its legs was bent at a terrible angle, twisted in a way that made Teho feel sick just looking at it. The Velkai collapsed at the edge of the water. It did not move anymore. It just lay there, breathing hard, its body shaking. Teho stared at it. His mind was racing. This was an enemy. This was one of the creatures that had killed his parents, destroyed his village, ruined his world. Every human left on Earth had a reason to hate the Velkai. He should leave it to die. That would be justice. But as he watched, the Velkai lifted its head. Its eyes, glowing a soft purple color, looked across the water. It saw him. It looked right at him, and in those eyes, Teho saw something he did not expect. He saw fear. He saw pain. He saw a desperate hope, the kind that only comes when someone has nothing left to lose. He had seen that look before. He had seen it in the mirror, 3 years ago, when he crawled out of his hiding place and realized he was alone in the world. The Velkai opened its mouth and made a sound. It was not words that Teho could understand, but the meaning was clear. It was asking for help. Teho stood there for a long time. The sky grew darker. The air grew colder. The river flowed between them, wide and deep and dangerous. He thought about his mother, who had always told him to be kind to others. He thought about his father, who had said that a person's true nature shows when no one is watching. No one was watching now. It was just Teho and a dying alien across the river. He made his choice. Slowly, he began to walk upstream, looking for a place where the water was shallow enough to cross. The river was cold. Teho could feel it through his worn shoes as he searched for a crossing point. The water moved fast here, swollen from the autumn rains. In the growing darkness, he could barely see where the rocks were beneath the surface. He found a spot about 200 meters upstream, where the river was wider but shallower. Large stones broke the surface of the water, creating a rough path to the other side. It was dangerous, but it was possible. Teho took a deep breath and stepped onto the first stone. The water rushed around his ankles, cold enough to make his bones ache. He moved carefully, testing each rock before putting his full weight on it. One wrong step, and the current would take him. It took him nearly 10 minutes to cross. By the time he reached the other bank, his whole body was shaking from the cold. His clothes were wet up to his waist. But he was alive, and he was on the other side. He made his way back downstream, pushing through the thick reeds, until he found the place where he had seen the Velkai fall. She was still there. He could tell now, from the shape of her body, that she was female. She lay on her side in the mud, her purple eyes half closed. Her breathing was slow and weak. The blood he had seen from across the river was dried and dark on her silver skin. Teho approached slowly, the way he would approach a wounded animal. He did not want to scare her. He did not know what a frightened Velkai might do, even an injured one. When he was about 3 meters away, her eyes opened fully. She saw him, and her body went stiff. Fear filled her face, clear as daylight, even though darkness had fallen around them. She tried to move away from him, dragging herself backward with her 2 working arms, but she was too weak. After moving only a short distance, she stopped. Her body could not go any further. She looked up at him, waiting for death. Teho held up his hands, showing that they were empty. He had no weapons. He had no intention to hurt her. He crouched down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. He pointed at himself and said his name. Teho. She did not respond. She probably did not understand. He pointed at her leg, the one that was bent in the wrong direction. He made a face to show that he knew it was painful. Then he pointed across the river, toward where his farmhouse was hidden in the darkness. He made a gesture like he was carrying something on his back. Her purple eyes watched him carefully. He could see her thinking, trying to understand what this strange human wanted. Taeho waited. He did not try to touch her or come closer. He simply waited for her to decide. For a long moment, nothing happened. The river continued to flow. The wind continued to blow. The night continued to grow darker. Then, slowly, she nodded. It was a small movement, barely visible. But Taeho understood. She was trusting him. She had no other choice. He moved closer and knelt beside her. Up close, he could see how badly hurt she was. Besides her broken leg and arms, there were deep cuts on her body. Her silver skin was covered in bruises that showed as darker patches of gray. She had been through something terrible. Taeho wondered what had happened to her. The Velkai were supposed to be powerful, almost unbeatable. What could have done this to one of them? But there was no time for questions. She needed help, and she needed it now. He positioned himself in front of her and turned his back. He pointed at his shoulders, trying to show her what to do. She understood. With great effort, she wrapped her two working arms around his neck. Her grip was weak, but it was enough. Taeho stood up slowly, lifting her with him. She was lighter than he expected. Her body felt almost hollow, like she was made of thin metal and air instead of flesh and bone. Later, he would learn that Velkai bones were hollow like bird bones. It helped them move faster, but made them more fragile. With the alien girl on his back, he began the long walk to the crossing point. She hung on to him, not making a sound, despite the pain she must have been feeling. Every step he took must have sent shocks through her broken bones. But she stayed quiet, trusting him to get her to safety. The crossing was harder this time. Taeho had to balance not just himself, but also the weight on his back. The stones were slippery, with water and moss. The current pushed against his legs, trying to knock him down. Halfway across, his foot slipped. For one terrible moment, he felt himself falling. The cold water reached up like hungry hands. He heard the alien girl gasp behind him, her arms tightening around his neck. Taeho threw his weight forward, catching himself on the next rock. His knee hit hard, sending pain shooting up his leg. But he did not fall. He did not let them both go into the river. He stayed still for a moment, breathing hard, feeling his heart pound in his chest. When they finally reached the other bank, Taeho nearly collapsed. His legs felt like they were made of water. His arms shook from the effort of holding her in place. But they had made it. They were across. He carried her up the slope, away from the river, and into the darkness of the forest. His farmhouse was not far now. Just a few hundred meters more. The alien girl's head rested against his shoulder. Her breathing had become steadier. She was still alive. As they walked, she made a soft sound. It took Taeho a moment to realize she was trying to speak. "Yira," she said. Her voice was strange, like music and metal mixed together. Taeho understood. It was her name. "Yira," he repeated. She made a sound that might have been agreement. Then she said his name, slowly and carefully, like she was learning how to speak for the first time. Tae-ho. Despite everything, despite the cold and the pain and the danger, Taeho smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in a very long time. "Yes," he said. "Taeho," and he carried her the rest of the way home. The farmhouse was dark when they arrived. Taeho had no electricity, no lights except for the small oil lamp he saved for emergencies, but he knew his home by heart. He could walk through every room with his eyes closed. He carried Yira inside and laid her gently on the old bed that had once belonged to his parents. The mattress was thin and worn, but it was better than the cold ground. She made a small sound of pain as her body touched the surface, but she did not cry out. Taeho lit his oil lamp. The small flame filled the room with soft orange light. For the first time, he could see Yira clearly. She was young, maybe around his own age, though he could not be sure how Velkai years compared to human ones. Her silver skin was dull with dirt and dried blood. Her hair, if it could be called hair, was made of thin metallic strands that fell around her face like threads of silver silk. Two of her forearms lay useless at her sides, twisted in ways that made Teho's stomach turn. Her leg was the worst. The bone was clearly broken below the knee, and the flesh around it had turned a dark gray color. She needed help, real medical help. But Teho had none to give. There were no doctors left in this area, no hospitals, no medicine except for a few herbs his grandmother had taught him about before she died. He would have to do his best with what he had. Teho went to his small kitchen and boiled water over a fire. He found clean cloth from an old shirt and tore it into strips. He gathered the herbs he knew could fight infection and reduce pain. It was not much, but it was something. When he returned to the bedroom, Yira's eyes were open. She watched him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She did not try to move or speak. She simply watched. Teho showed her the cloth and the warm water. He pointed at her wounds and made a cleaning motion. She seemed to understand. She nodded slightly, giving him permission. He started with the cuts on her body. He cleaned them gently, washing away the dirt and dried blood. Yira stayed perfectly still, though he could see her body tense with pain each time he touched a wound. Her skin felt strange under his fingers, smoother than human skin, cooler to the touch. The cuts were not as bad as he had feared. Most of them were shallow and would heal on their own. He applied a paste made from healing herbs and wrapped the worst ones with clean cloth. Her arms were a bigger problem. Teho was not a doctor. He did not know how Velkai bones worked or how to set them properly. But he knew that leaving broken bones without treatment could be dangerous. They could heal wrong or get infected. He tried to communicate with Yira, using gestures to explain what he wanted to do. He found two straight pieces of wood that could serve as splints. He showed them to her and pointed at her arms. Yira looked at the wooden sticks for a long moment. Then, she looked at her broken arms. Understanding filled her eyes. She knew this would hurt. She nodded. Teho worked as carefully as he could. He straightened her arms, as gently as possible, and tied the wooden splints in place with strips of cloth. Yira's body shook with pain. Strange sounds came from her throat. Sounds that were not quite screams but close. Her working hands grabbed the edge of the bed so hard that her silver fingers left marks in the wood. But she did not tell him to stop. She let him finish. When both arms were wrapped and secured, Teho moved to her leg. This was the worst injury. The bone was broken completely, and the lower part of her leg was bent at an angle that should have been impossible. Setting it would cause tremendous pain. He looked at Yira, trying to ask with his eyes if she was ready. She understood. She took several deep breaths. Then she reached out with one of her working hands and grabbed his arm. Something strange happened. When her hand touched his skin, Teho felt something flow into him. It was not pain exactly, but a kind of pressure in his mind. And then, suddenly, he understood her. Not her words. Her feelings. He felt her fear. Deep and cold, like the river at night. He felt her pain, sharp and hot like fire. But beneath all of that, he felt something else. Gratitude, trust, hope. She was telling him that she believed in him. She was telling him to do what he needed to do. Teho took a deep breath and set her leg. Yira screamed. It was a sound unlike anything Teho had ever heard. A mixture of music and metal that filled the small farmhouse and echoed into the night. Her body arched off the bed. Her eyes blazed with purple light. But it was over quickly. Teho wrapped the leg in splints, holding the bone in place. He worked fast, not giving himself time to doubt. When he was finished, Yira collapsed back onto the bed, breathing hard, her whole body covered in sweat. She was still alive. The bones were set. It was the best he could do. Taeho sat back against the wall, exhausted. His hands were shaking. His whole body felt empty, like he had given everything he had. For a long time, neither of them moved. The oil lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind blew through the trees, making sounds like whispered secrets. Then, Yira turned her head toward him. Her purple eyes found his in the dim light. She said something in her own language. Words that Taeho could not understand, but her meaning was clear. He could feel it through the strange connection they had shared. "Thank you," Taeho nodded. He did not know why he had helped her. He did not know what would happen tomorrow, or the day after. He only knew that, for tonight, at least, neither of them was alone. He pulled an old blanket from the corner and covered her gently. Then he sat down on the floor beside the bed, his back against the wall. He would keep watch. He would make sure she was safe. It was the first time in 3 years that Taeho had something to protect besides himself. Days passed slowly in the old farmhouse. The autumn air grew colder each morning. Leaves fell from the trees like golden rain. And inside the small house, a human boy and an alien girl learned to live together. At first, communication was almost impossible. Yira spoke her own language, full of musical sounds that Taeho could not copy. Taeho spoke Korean, which sounded harsh and strange to Yira's ears. They used gestures and expressions to share basic ideas: water, food, sleep, pain. But slowly, things began to change. Yira learned quickly. She picked up Korean words faster than Taeho expected. By the 3rd day, she could say simple things like, "Water please," and "Thank you." By the 5th day, she could make short sentences. Her accent was strange, her words often in the wrong order. But she could make herself understood. Taeho discovered that Yira had another way of communicating too. When she touched his hand, she could send feelings directly into his mind. Not words or pictures, but emotions. She could show him if she was happy or sad, grateful or scared. It was strange at first, feeling someone else's emotions as if they were his own. But Taeho grew used to it. He learned many things about her in those early days. She was 15 years old in human years, the same age as him. She was the only daughter of a powerful leader named Lord Kale, one of the most important commanders in the Velkai occupation. She had been traveling with a group of soldiers when something went wrong. Human resistance fighters had attacked them with weapons they had stolen from the Velkai. There was an explosion. The transport crashed. Yira was thrown into the wilderness, hurt and alone. For 3 days, she had crawled through the forest, looking for help. For 3 days, she had expected to die. Then she found the river. And across the river, she found Taeho. Taeho shared his story too. He told her about his parents, his village, the day everything was destroyed. He spoke slowly, using simple words, and sometimes Yira would touch his hand to feel what he could not say. When he talked about finding his home burned and empty, she felt his sadness as clearly as if it were her own. Her eyes filled with water. Taeho had not known that Velkai could cry. Something changed between them after that. They were no longer just a human and an alien, victim and invader. They were 2 young people who had lost everything, finding something in each other. Taeho took care of her. Each morning, he changed the bandages on her wounds. He checked the splints on her arms and leg. He made food from whatever he could find, fish from the river, and vegetables from his small garden. The meals were simple, but Yira never complained. She ate whatever he gave her, and always said, "Thank you." Her body began to heal. The cuts closed and faded. The bruises disappeared. Her arms started to move again, slowly and painfully, but they moved. Even her leg was getting better, though she still could not walk. Yira spent most of her time on the bed, But she was not idle. She asked Taeho endless questions about his world. What did humans eat? How did they live? What were their families like? What did they believe in? Taeho answered as best he could. He told her about rice and kimchi, about holidays and traditions, about the mountains and rivers of Korea. He realized, as he talked, that he had not thought about these things in a long time. He had been so focused on survival that he had forgotten what it meant to live. Yura listened to everything with wide, curious eyes. She seemed genuinely interested, not just polite. Sometimes, she would share something about her own world in return. She told him about her home planet, a place with 3 moons and oceans that glowed at night. She told him about cities made of crystal that could change shape with the weather. She told him about the music of her people, songs that could make flowers bloom or stop storms. It sounded beautiful. It sounded like a dream. Taeho asked her once why her people had come to Earth. Why had they invaded? Why had they killed so many humans? Yura was quiet for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was soft and sad. Her people were dying, she said. Their sun was growing cold. In another 100 years, their planet would be frozen and dead. They had searched the universe for a new home and found Earth, a beautiful planet with warm light and blue water, a planet where they could survive. They had not meant to kill so many humans. They had believed that humans were primitive creatures, barely intelligent, living in chaos and violence. They had thought they were doing Earth a favor by taking control. Only now, Yura said, was she beginning to understand how wrong they had been. Taeho did not know what to say to that. He was angry at her people for what they had done. He would probably always be angry. But looking at Yura, at this young girl who had shown him kindness and trust, he could not hate her. Perhaps, he thought, hate was not as simple as he had believed. The days continued to pass. Yura grew stronger. Taeho grew less lonely. And somewhere in the distance, though neither of them knew it yet, something was coming. Someone was searching. The peace they had found would not last forever. 1 week had passed since Taeho carried Yura across the river. Outside, the autumn had grown deeper. The mornings were cold now, the kind of cold that made your breath turn to mist in the air. But inside the small farmhouse, something warm was growing. Yura could sit up now without help. Her arms had healed enough that she could use all 4 of them again, though they were still weak and sore. Her leg was still broken, still wrapped in splints, but the pain had faded to something she could bear. On this morning, Taeho decided to teach her something new. He went to the river before dawn and caught 3 fish. When he came back, the sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Yura was awake, sitting on the bed, looking out the window at the light. Taeho showed her the fish. He held up his fishing line and hook, explaining with words and gestures how he had caught them. Yura watched with great interest, her purple eyes following every movement of his hands. When he was finished explaining, she pointed at herself, and then at the fishing line. She wanted to try. Taeho could not help but smile. He found an old piece of wood and set it on the bed next to her. He tied the line to a small stick and showed her how to throw it forward, how to move her wrist, how to feel for the pull of a fish. Yura tried. Her first throw was terrible. The line went sideways and tangled around her arm. She made a sound that might have been frustration or laughter. Taeho was not sure. He helped her untangle the line and showed her again. She tried once more. This time the throw was better, but still not quite right. Again and again. After about 20 attempts, Yura finally managed to throw the line straight forward. It was not a perfect cast, but it was good enough. She looked at Taeho with such pride in her eyes that he had to look away to hide his own smile. They spent the morning like that, practicing and laughing. It was strange, Taeho thought, how quickly things had changed. A week ago, he would have said that humans and Velkai could never be friends. Now here he was, teaching fishing to an alien girl in his dead parents' bedroom. Life was unpredictable. In the afternoon, Yira wanted to show him something too. She asked him to bring paper and a pen. Taeho found an old notebook that had once belonged to his mother and a pencil that was almost too short to hold. Yira took the pencil in one of her hands. With great care, she drew a symbol on the paper. It was beautiful, made of curved lines that flowed into each other like water. When she finished, the symbol glowed faintly for a moment, a soft purple light that quickly faded. Taeho stared at it in amazement. Yira explained that this was how her people wrote. Their symbols held power. The right symbol, drawn the right way, could do many things. This particular symbol meant safety. In her culture, parents drew it on their children's doors to protect them from harm. She wanted Taeho to have it. He did not know what to say. He looked at the glowing symbol, at the hope in Yira's eyes, and felt something tight in his chest. It was not sadness, exactly. It was not happiness either. It was something in between, something he could not name. He carefully tore the page from the notebook and folded it. That night, they talked more than they ever had before. Yira asked Taeho about his happiest memories. He told her about summer festivals, about watching fireworks with his parents, about the taste of his mother's sweet rice cakes. Yira listened to every word, as if it were a precious treasure. Then she told him about her own happy memories. She told him about swimming in the glowing oceans of her world. She told him about her mother, who had died when Yira was young. She told him about her father, who was strict and powerful but loved her more than anything. She missed him, she said. She hoped he was not too worried about her. Taeho realized something then. Despite everything, despite the war and the invasion and all the death, Yira was just a daughter who loved her father. Just like he was a son who had loved his parents. They were not so different after all. Later that night, when the lamp was low and the darkness had settled around them, Yira reached out and took Taeho's hand. He felt her emotions flow into him. Gratitude, warm and bright. Friendship, steady and true. And something else, something deeper. A feeling that she could not put into words, even in her own language. She was glad she had met him. Of all the places she could have fallen, of all the rivers she could have crawled to, she had found him. She did not believe in accidents. She believed this had happened for a reason. Taeho did not know if he believed in reasons or fate. But he was glad too. For the first time in 3 years, he was truly glad to be alive. Outside, the moon rose high in the cold autumn sky. Inside, 2 souls from different worlds held hands in the darkness. Neither of them knew that this peace was about to end. Neither of them knew that somewhere far above, in a ship that floated among the stars, a father was searching desperately for his daughter, and he was getting close. The morning started like any other. Taeho woke up early, checked Yira's bandages, and went to the river to catch breakfast. The autumn air was sharp and clean, and the sky was clear for the first time in days. It was a beautiful morning, the kind that made you believe that maybe things would be okay. When he returned to the farmhouse with 2 fat fish, he found Yira sitting up in bed with a strange expression on her face. She was holding something small in her hand, something that had been hidden in her clothes. It was a device of some kind, made of the same silver metal as her skin. It was no bigger than a thumb, smooth and round, with tiny lights blinking on its surface. Taeho knew immediately what it was. A beacon, a way to call for help. Yira looked at him with guilty eyes. She had kept this secret from him for 9 days. 9 days of sharing meals and stories and laughter. 9 days of growing closer. And all that time, she had been carrying the thing that could bring her people right to his door. For a moment, Taeho felt something cold in his chest. Was this all a trick? Had she been using him? Would the Velkai soldiers come and kill him as soon as they arrived? But then Yira spoke, and his fears melted away. She explained everything. Yes, she had the beacon. Yes, she could have used it on the first night, but she had not. She had wanted to wait. She had wanted to know if this human boy was truly kind, or if he had some hidden reason for helping her. Now she knew. Taeho was good. He was perhaps the best person she had ever met, human or Velkai, and she would never let anyone hurt him. She held up the beacon. Her finger was on the button. She asked him, with her eyes and her words, if she could press it. Taeho thought about what this meant. Within hours, Velkai soldiers would arrive. They would find him, a human, living with the daughter of one of their most powerful commanders. Even if Yira defended him, would they listen? Or would they see only an enemy who needed to be destroyed? He thought about running. He could leave right now, disappear into the forest, go somewhere far away where they would never find him. He had survived alone for 3 years. He could do it again. But looking at Yira, at her injured body and hopeful eyes, he knew he could not abandon her. She needed her family. She needed medical help that he could not give. And more than anything, she deserved to go home. He nodded. Yira pressed the button. The beacon lit up brightly for a moment, then went dark. The signal had been sent. There was no taking it back now. They sat in silence for a long time. There was nothing to do. But wait. Yira told Taeho what would happen next. The signal would travel to the nearest Velkai ship. It would identify her as the daughter of Lord KL. Response teams would be sent immediately, probably within a few hours. She would be taken home, given proper medical care, and reunited with her father. Taeho asked what would happen to him. Yira was quiet for a moment. Then she took his hand, letting him feel her determination, her absolute certainty. She would protect him. She would tell her father everything. She would tell him about the river, the crossing, the nights of care and kindness. She would make him understand that not all humans were enemies, and she would make sure that Taeho was treated with honor. Taeho wanted to believe her. He truly did. But he had seen what the Velkai could do. He had seen villages burned and families torn apart. He had lost everything to these creatures, who now controlled his world. Could words really change anything? Could one girl's story make a difference? He did not know. But he had made his choice. He would face whatever came. The day passed slowly. Yira taught Taeho more Velkai words. Taeho taught Yira a song his mother used to sing. They shared memories and hopes, filling the silence with their voices. As the sun began to set, Yira told him something she had never told anyone before. When she had first seen him across the river, she had been ready to die. She had expected him to throw stones at her, or run away, or simply watch her suffer. That was what she had been taught about humans. That was what she had believed. But he had not done any of those things. He had crossed a dangerous river, in the dark. He had carried her on his back. He had healed her wounds with his own hands. He had shown her that everything she believed was wrong. If one human could be this good, she said, then maybe many humans were good. Maybe most of them were good. Maybe the war had been a terrible mistake from the beginning. She wanted to change things. She wanted to tell her people the truth. She wanted to build a bridge between their worlds. It was a big dream. Maybe impossible. But she believed it could happen. Because of him, Taeho did not know what to say. No one had ever told him that he mattered this much. No one had ever said that his simple actions could change the world. He held her hand as the last light faded from the sky. Tomorrow would bring danger. Tomorrow would bring fear. But tonight, they still had each other. The signal had been sent. The countdown had begun. All they could do now was wait for sunrise. Taeho did not sleep that night. He sat by the window, watching the stars, waiting for the sky to change. He thought about his parents. He wondered what they would think if they could see him now. Their son sitting beside an alien girl, waiting for enemy soldiers to arrive. He liked to think they would be proud. They had always taught him to be kind, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The first light of dawn appeared in the east. Pink and gold spread across the horizon, pushing back the darkness. It was going to be another beautiful day. Then he heard it. A sound like thunder, but deeper, more powerful. It came from above, from somewhere beyond the clouds. Taeho looked up and saw them. Ships. Not one or two, but many. They descended through the morning sky like silver birds, their metal bodies catching the light of the rising sun. His heart began to beat faster. This was it. There was no running now. He went to Yira and helped her sit up. She was awake, of course. She had heard the ships, too. Her purple eyes were bright, with a mixture of hope and fear. They did not speak. There was nothing left to say. Taeho walked outside and stood in front of his farmhouse. The morning air was cold on his face. The grass was wet with dew. Around him, the forest was waking up. Birds beginning to sing their first songs of the day. And above him, the ships came down. There were 5 of them, sleek and silver, landing in the field beyond the farmhouse. Before they even touched the ground, doors opened on their sides. Soldiers poured out like water from a broken dam, 50 Velkai warriors. All of them were tall and strong, wearing armor that gleamed in the dawn light. They carried weapons that Taeho could not understand, things that hummed with deadly energy. They moved in perfect formation, spreading out, surrounding the farmhouse from every side. Taeho stood alone before them, a small human boy in torn clothes, with no weapon and no defense. The soldiers stopped. They aimed their weapons at him. Any one of them could have killed him with a single shot, but no one fired. A new figure emerged from the largest ship. He was taller than the other Velkai, nearly 2.5 meters high. His silver skin was darker, almost gray, and covered with scars that told stories of many battles. His 4 arms were thick with muscle. His eyes burned with a fierce blue light. This was Lord KL, commander of the Eastern Occupation, one of the most powerful Velkai on Earth, and the father of the girl that Taeho had carried across a river. Lord Kale walked forward slowly. His footsteps made no sound on the wet grass. His eyes never left Taeho, studying him, measuring him, trying to understand this strange creature who had dared to touch his daughter. He stopped 3 meters away, close enough for Taeho to see every detail of his alien face, close enough to feel the power that radiated from him, like heat from a fire. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world held its breath. Then the door of the farmhouse opened behind Taeho. He heard the sound of limping footsteps, the tap of a walking stick on wood. Yira came out. She was leaning on a branch that Taeho had carved for her, moving slowly but steadily. She had insisted on walking on her own, even though every step caused her pain. She moved past Taeho and stopped between him and her father. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. She did not speak Korean now. She spoke her own language, words that rose and fell like music. Taeho could not understand what she said, but he could feel her emotions through the bond they shared. She was pleading. She was explaining. She was fighting for his life with every word. Lord Kale listened in silence. His expression did not change. His blue eyes burned steady and cold. Yira talked for a long time. She gestured at Taeho, at the farmhouse, at her own healing body. She showed her father the bandages that Taeho had made, the splints that had held her bones together. She reached out and touched his arm, sending her memories directly into his mind, the way she had done with Taeho so many times before. When she finished, she stepped back and waited. Lord Kale was silent. The soldiers were silent. The whole world was silent, except for the birds singing in the trees. Then Lord Kyle did something that no one expected. Slowly, with great dignity, he lowered himself to one knee. His armor rang softly as it touched the ground. He bowed his head, his eyes now level with Taeho's own. Behind him, 50 warriors did the same. The sound of their armor hitting the earth was like distant thunder. Lord Kale spoke. His voice was deep and strong, and somehow Taeho understood every word, as if the meaning was being sent directly into his mind. Among my people, there is no greater honor than the saving of a child, no greater debt than a life owed. He reached up and removed something from his chest. It was a medallion, made of metal that seemed to hold light within it. Ancient symbols covered its surface, symbols that glowed softly with power. This is the mark of my house. I give it to you, now. He held it out to Taeho. From this day, you are under my protection. Any who harm you will answer to me. Any door of my people will open for you. You are Velkoron, honored stranger, brother of my daughter. Taeho reached out with trembling hands and took the medallion. It was warm against his palm, warm like sunlight, warm like hope. Lord Kael rose to his feet. He turned to his soldiers and gave a command. They began to move, not toward the farmhouse, as Taeho had feared, but around it. They brought tools and materials from their ships. They started to work. Within hours, the old broken farmhouse was transformed. New walls rose where old ones had crumbled. Clean water flowed through pipes that had not worked in years. Food and supplies filled rooms that had been empty for so long. The Velkai were not destroying his home. They were rebuilding it. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Yira came to stand beside Taeho. She was crying, silver tears running down her silver cheeks. I told you, she said softly. I told you they would listen. Taeho looked at his rebuilt home, at the warriors working under the morning sun, at the girl beside him who had changed everything. He did not have words for what he felt. So he did what she had taught him to do. He reached out and took her hand, letting his emotions flow into her. Gratitude, amazement, hope, and something else. Something that went beyond words, beyond species, beyond all the walls that had been built between their peoples. Friendship, true friendship. Yura squeezed his hand and smiled. Before she left with her father, she made him one last promise. She would come back. She would visit as often as she could. And together, they would build something new. Taeho believed her. He stood outside his rebuilt home and watched the ships rise into the sky, carrying Yira back to her world. The sun was fully up now, bright and warm on his face. For the first time in 3 years, he was not afraid of tomorrow. And somewhere across the stars, the story of a human orphan who showed kindness to an enemy began to spread. It passed from ship to ship, from world to world. It made the Velkai question what they thought they knew. It planted seeds of change that would grow for generations. All because one boy chose to cross a river. All because one act of kindness changed everything. The end.